Hello and welcome to Going Over Our Freds, the internet's only podcast about movies. No, wait, no, that's not true. The only podcast about Fred Olin Ray movies, where I drag Meredith watching every movie directed by B-movie auteur Fred Olin Ray. And who's that sitting across from me again? I just said her name.
Oh, I think it's Meredith.
It's Meredith.
I
And
think
who
that's
am
my
I?
name. I think you're Michael Kennedy.
That's right, also known as ML Kennedy for my literally tens of fans of my fiction. What movie did we watch today?
We watched Billy Frankenstein, which is a 1998 fantasy comedy horror.
Yeah. Wow, I watched this movie earlier this week, and the first thing I did afterward was text you an apology because, my goodness.
I've seen worse.
Yeah. This, of course, was directed by Fred Olin Ray, but what's special about this one is that it was written by Kimberly A. Ray, his wife at the time. Kimberly A. Ray is mostly a producer. She's produced like 98 things. They divorced a few years back, but they're still friends.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote 4 movies. Bikini Traffic School, Final Examination was the last one she wrote in like 2003. And the first movie she's credited as writing is Mystery on Makeout Mountain. And Mystery on Makeout Mountain, strangely enough, was also directed by Fred Olin Ray and features 2 cast members from this movie. So I don't know. I think we have a cinematic universe here between Fred and Kimberly Ray. Tell us about Bikini Frankenstein? No, Billy Frankenstein.
I kind of wanted to be Bikini Frankenstein. I think that would have been a more fun approach to the story.
I was like 20 minutes into this movie and I'm like, oh God, this is really dragging. I just can't wait till the boobs show up. And then I'm like, wait a second, there's no boobs in this one.
Yeah, it's a family-friendly piece. Our protagonist is an 11-year-old boy named Billy. This movie has a couple of Fred Olin Ray hallmarks that are a little challenging to review in a plot recap. We've encountered this before, where we'll focus on one set of characters, we will cut to another set of characters briefly for some slight progression on their story. This is frustrating because there's a lot of back and forth, so in the plot recap, I kind of condensed a lot of that. Right, so I'm just going to say, like, these characters did this whole thing and ignore that there was several interruptions of the flow.
Yeah, he tends to do things with the A storyline, B storyline, and sometimes C storyline, a lot like a sitcom would.
Yeah, so maybe that's what Fred Olin Ray really ought to have done for most of his career was sitcom writing, but he didn't. He directed this. We start off this movie in a crowded alley market, and immediately it's very confusing because it's clearly filmed in the 90s, but they seem to be sort of in a medieval market and sort of dressed like maybe they're in medieval times. The point of this was to set up a Frankenstein doll that one vendor is selling. And then we cut immediately to the credits.
So wait, but there's no like big joke at the end of this? We get this intro and then like there's just a doll and there's no real like joke. There's no real like big, nothing really punctuates this opening scene. It completely threw me off.
Yeah.
But we do have a set that shows up a lot, which is our narrow alley set. Like it might be 1830s Germany, like the setting of Frankenstein or something like that. But we don't have enough budget to show anything else. We just have one very crowded alley set.
Yes. It did a bad job of setting time period. It did a bad job of setting geographic location. It was a bad opening shot, and frankly, we should have had a title card.
Yeah. But then we cut to the theme music, which I actually kind of like. You know, Chuck Serino did the music for this, and he did the music for Chopping Mall.
Did he do the theme music for the Munsters?
Sadly, no. It sounds like a Munsters ripoff to you?
There were ripoff elements to it.
Wait, it's a movie about a funny Frankenstein and it might be ripping off some of the Munsters?
Like, this is not the first time the Munsters is ripped off by this movie. Not at all. I know. All right, so after the credits, we cut to a funeral, and Orson Welles is playing music on the organ.
Not really Orson Welles. That is a guy named Peter Spellos. So one of the connecting themes of this movie is that the stars are pretty much voice actors.
Oh.
So Peter Spellos, he was in Mystery on Makeout Mountain, the Fred Olin Ray, Kimberly Ray movie from like the year before. But for the most part, he does video game voices. and I think he does anime dubs. He's Skybite in Transformers, and he's doing English versions of, a Ghost in the Shell movie. He doesn't really have like a giant big credit, but yeah, he's just like a guy who they get to go, for an anime.
All right. Well, he does a creditable job of playing Orson Welles, playing Mr. Bloodstone. And during the funeral, there is a loudly grieving woman, and she climbs on top of the closed casket and is then dragged out of the church. And now we get into some like weird comedy bit because a beeper goes off inside the casket, and Mr. Bloodstone opens up the casket, pulls out the beeper, and he does like a little bit of a comedy bit, which concludes when the people who are attending the funeral throw like rotten food at him.
Yeah. It's not really good comedy. It should be playing off of the reactions to the joke of having the woman ride the casket like, the Big Show, when the Big Boss Man stole his. Everybody knows like 20-year-old wrestling bits, right?
No.
But anyway, it either needs to be playing up one of the jokes as a big joke or go Naked Gun style and have a bunch of little jokes. But here it has like 3 medium style jokes, none of that are really treated importantly, so nothing is really funny. I think, this is part of the problem. It's a movie that's made for 8-year-olds, and we're going to get into that a lot. It's just like, okay, well, I'm not the key demographic for this, but maybe if I was 8, I would love this movie.
That's fair. Because I did expect that wailing woman to come back in some form and have that be relevant somehow. It's not. We never see her again. Okay. Cut to a mother. Her name is Sandy, and 11-year-old Billy, her son. They are spending some time together. She is painting a picture, and Billy is complaining about his absentee father.
Sandy is credited as Melissa Williamson in this movie, but she's actually Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. And what do you think she does for a living mostly?
She's beautiful, so I would say model?
Voice actress.
Wow.
She is another voice actress. She did a lot of voices for Cowboy Bebop. She was in Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust.
Wow.
She is a video game voice all the time. She's in like one of the Resident Evils. I think she's moved on to voice directing now. And while we're at it, I might as well talk about who Billy Frankenstein is in this movie. He has 2 IMDb credits. I know, you're looking at his acting ability here, and you're like, yeah, that seems about right. But yeah, no, he's got credit in this movie, and then many, many years later, he is credited as a musician in a Rachel Bloom music video called Jazz Fever. He's basically been working with one of his brothers as a jazz musician, occasionally doing kind of like Broadway style stuff. So
I'm glad that he chose a different path. So we learn that the father, his name is George, is some sort of hotel manager type. We see him in his office, no computer in sight. It's 1998. This man is managing a hotel with an adding machine and a paper spreadsheet.
Yeah, he spends the first hour of this movie just sitting at a desk. I thought for a second, is he just going to be at this desk the whole movie? Did they have him for a day?
It's not a surprise that he's really stressed out and overwhelmed by his job because he's doing manual calculations to manage this hotel in 1998. Of course he's staying late. Of course he's working weekends. This hotel can't afford to give him an ancient PC from 1982, which would do his job for him. It boggles the mind. Okay.
I mean, he would have to learn DOS. It's a whole thing.
Oh, it's a whole thing. Terrible.
You know how
terrible.
expensive Windows 98 was in 98? I mean, think about that. The dad is played by a guy named Darren Norris, and what do you think he primarily does as a career?
I'm going to learn from past experience and guess that he's a voice actor.
That's right. He's a voice actor. Now, he is a guy that's got like kind of a big show. He is the voice of Cosmo and the dad on Fairly Odd Parents.
Okay.
So he's like a Nickelodeon guy. He's done some live action stuff for them too. He was a recurring character on Big Time Rush. But mostly, and I don't think this is offensive to him, but I will say that Darren Norris has spent most of his career just trying to be Phil Hartman.
Oh.
To the point where he was even signed on to do a Phil Hartman biopic a few years ago that never really came to fruition. And one more kind of fun fact since we're on this, Darren Norris was married to Mary Elizabeth McGlynn at the time of this movie, and for quite a few years. They were married until I think from 88 until 2012. So the mom and the dad in this movie were actually married.
Which means that their lack of being able to act like realistic parents is that much worse.
Maybe that's why they divorced.
That's a long marriage to just like up and get divorced.
That is a long marriage, but Mary
Wow.
Elizabeth McGlynn, at least, I know she remarried because she is married to another voice actor now who does not show up in this movie, but she is married to Steve Bloom, who
Okay.
is the voice of Wolverine in everything since the X-Men animated series.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Everybody being a voice actor really explains what happens when George gets a phone call at the office from somebody who's asking to speak with George Frankenstein. George flips out. He's very sensitive about the word Frankenstein. There is no way that he is associated with that name. He is not George Frankenstein. His name is George Frank. And reflecting now, his delivery would have made so much more sense if we were looking at a cartoon saying these words instead of this man's face.
It's a lot of overacting in this movie, and it's a lot of people having one-sided phone conversations
Yeah.
where it's like, hello? Yes? Where is my car? It's on the street. Like, it's just these like most awkward kind of improv scene phone conversations you've ever seen in your life. But,
Not great.
again, if you're 8, it's probably great.
And that explains all of the context that is delivered in monologue. Our next scene, we're back to Mr. Bloodstone, who is delivering essentially a monologue of context. Okay, so this is how we learn that the funeral was indeed for Dr. Frankenstein, and that this Dr. Frankenstein had been on the verge of creating a great monster. And we also learn that without the monster, the name Frankenstein means nothing. Okay, so we have Dr. Frankenstein's attorney also shows up. This attorney's name is Sheldon. And through some dialogue, we understand that Sheldon kind of botched the taxes. And now the estate of Dr. Frankenstein owes $25,000 to the IRS or whatever the German counterpoint is, because they do say dollars instead of
Deutschmarks?
yeah. I don't know if they switched the currency recently or whatever.
I don't think they were at euros yet because the sign at the end of the movie has DM for Deutschmarks.
Got it.
Not only do we have a monster plot, we have every 80s movie plot of like, we need to raise money to save the blah.
Yes, exactly. So Sheldon's got a plan, and it involves the heir to the Frankenstein estate. So earlier, when George got a phone call, that was Sheldon trying to reach him. Sheldon's plan is for the heirs to come and take possession of the home, and they'll pay the back taxes, right? That'll be great. So we kind of cut immediately to the Frank family, Sandy, Billy, and Sandy's sister, Thelma. They go to Dr. Frankenstein's castle, minus George. George is staying behind.
But okay, so I remember he got a phone call. He's like,
Yeah.
"Don't call me Frankenstein." And he hung up. He got another phone call, and he's like, "Oh, like what changes his mind to answer that second phone call to say like, oh, we've got a castle. Let's go visit it."
A very long monologue where he's trying to come to terms with his identity.
Okay, because there's a lot of scenes of people just kind of talking to themselves and explaining their thinking. It's a lot like Shakespeare's I Know What You're Thinking there. So I didn't mention who played Sheldon and who played Thelma because Sheldon literally has no other credits. I think he does a good job, but he's essentially a non-actor in this situation. And then Thelma has only one other movie credit as an actor. She played Tough Girl Number 2 in like a movie from 1996. And then she's got like 2 credits in the makeup department. It's just like pretty much who was around. Like maybe these were friends of Kimberly Ray. I don't know where they got these people from.
Thelma doesn't do that bad of a job for not being an actor. Same for Sheldon.
Yeah, I think Sheldon does fine. I think Thelma does fine. Like she's supposed to be annoying, but that just means she's got big glasses and is a little mean. I don't really know.
Yeah, she's a little mean, and she raises very good questions that are inconvenient for the other characters to consider. Okay, so meanwhile, we're in like some sort of dungeon. There we meet a constable Frug, whose name is spelled frog with 2 G's, and he's very sensitive about his name, and he's like, it's Frug and not frog, and everybody calls him frog. So that's an ongoing not funny joke. Constable Frug's mission in life is to recapture the monster because his father, who was a constable, and his grandfather, who was also a constable, they caught Frankenstein's monster during their respective careers, like caught and recaught.
Is it the same monster each time, too?
Yeah.
Like, it made it sound like at the beginning that, oh, okay, well, I guess this is the last Dr. Frankenstein that made the monster. And then there's like, no, there's generations of Frankensteins that make a monster, but it's all the same monster.
I think it's the same monster, and it's the same actor and the same makeup and costume, so we'll just go with it. Same monster.
Yeah.
Does not decay. It's magic. Great. We're fine.
So Frug he's a guy named John Maynard who has like 52 credits, and they're all roles like random doctor, construction worker number 4. So he's been on like a bunch of sitcoms, but like it's in blink and you'll miss it parts basically. So
visiting Constable Frug is our film's villain, whose name is Otto van Schloem. And Otto is the richest man in the village. And he is so rich that Dr. Frankenstein's castle is the only thing in town that he could not buy. And this grinds his gears, right?
Yeah.
Now that Dr. Frankenstein is dead and the castle is passed on to his heirs, Otto wants to seize the opportunity, get the property, tear it down, and turn it into a mega shopping mall. And that's in quotes, mega shopping mall.
Destroying a family piece of property to build a shopping mall, unless you can come up with $25,000, is a quintessential 80s plot. But this movie is taking place in 1997 or 8. So, like, malls are already on the decline. This is not a timely movie, is what I'm saying here.
Shopping malls in the States are on the decline. What about
who knows about Germany?
Yeah.
Okay, now Otto he's one of the top 3 most famous actors in this movie. I'm counting Darren Norris as famous because he was on a bunch of Nickelodeon stuff. So does he look at all familiar to you? Does Otto?
No.
He had a really good run for about 3 years in the 80s. He was in Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, as like this big scary biker with a mohawk. And then he transitioned that fame to play a big scary biker in Weird Science, kind of parodying what he'd already done. And then his biggest role is Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Where he played the head bad guy in Commando. So his career kind of peaked in 1985. But, he kept on working anyway. He did a bunch of Power Rangers. He played a character named Rancic on like 40 episodes of different Power Rangers brands. I forget. And 2 different movies that are completely unconnected called Fortress. So one of them is the Stuart Gordon Fortress, and one of them is an Australian movie from about 7 years before that one. So very famous person, Vernon Wells.
So Otto has arrived to Constable Frug's dungeon office with a woman who looks like a cross between Swiss Miss from the hot chocolate brand and St. Pauli's Girl from the beer brand. So she's wearing a German dirndl and she's got blonde hair and it's in 2 braids. Throughout this movie, I was listening for her name and I couldn't catch it. I finally looked it up. The character's name is Fraulein.
Yep, it's just Fraulein.
Like, what the hell?
It's so funny because the more boobs are in the movie, the more developed the female characters are in Fred Olen Ray movies. I think we've noticed that trend, right? Because we know who these characters are in like Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. They've got like their own personalities.
Yes.
But in like The Shooter, there's barely any boobs and the female characters don't matter at all.
Right.
So it's interesting. Fraulein, this is her first family movie. This is an actor named Griffin Drew, who was the 3rd person on that Mystery on Makeout Mountain. She was in all sorts of movies, which are... Okay, so they kind of have amazing names. She was in The Bear Wench Project 2. She was not in the first Bear Wench Project, but she was in the one after that, the Bear Wench Project Uncensored. And she was in 2 different dinosaur movies. Her first film was Dinosaur Island, which we will eventually have to watch, but it's not available for streaming anywhere. It was co-directed by Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski together. She's in it, and Peter Spellos is in that too, who's, Bloodstone in this movie. And in addition to that, she is also in Dinosaur Valley Girls, which is kind of a ripoff of Dinosaur Island, which is weird because because you're ripping off a B movie? And then she was in like The Kid with the X-Ray Eye, and then she worked in a bunch of stuff called like The Sex Files. So she mostly makes booby pictures. Billy Frankenstein is really kind of a standout on her resume.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Otto and Fraulein have visited Constable Frug because they want to enlist his help in forcing the Frank family to sell the castle. And the way that they plan to do this is by convincing the family that Frankenstein's monster is real. Frug, he's very happy about this plan because this means that Otto is going to fully finance his monster hunting efforts. So he's kind of got a dual motivation here.
It's win-win, yeah.
Yeah, win-win. Convince the family that the monster is real through some how do you say subterfuge? Is that subterfuge?
Subterfuge.
Oh,
so you got to hit the B. Subterfuge.
Subterfuge. Meanwhile, the Frank family arrives at the castle. They're exploring the castle. It is hideous.
The carpeted spiral staircase is the most hideous part. It does not look
awful.
at all like a castle. It just looks like grandma's house.
Oh, that's being generous. I think it looks like a theme restaurant or even like an event venue because those floors are meant to be hosed down and cleaned.
Yeah.
The rugs seem to be put on there for the movie. A style very Southern California. So I was surprised to see it in Germany.
But we're definitely in Germany.
We're so in Germany.
That's why upwards of 2 characters are speaking in German accents. Just Fraulein and Frug.
So we're exploring the castle and Billy finds an old journal that has a title, The Secrets of Life and Death by Dr. Frankenstein. So because all the characters are talking to themselves, we learn from Billy that he's for sure going to read that journal cover to cover. And we also learn that Mr. Bloodstone planted that journal into Billy's room so that he would find it and read it. What we learn here is that this journal indicates that there is a family legacy to create new life, and it includes detailed maps of the house and instructions for how to create life.
There's upwards of like 4 rooms in this house, so I'm glad he has a map.
There's a basement, a kitchen.
And Thelma's room.
And Thelma's room, yes. So that night, a thunderstorm rolls in. We've got some thunder, lightning, and very atmospheric. And we see Constable Frug, Otto, and Fraulein. They're launching their effort to frighten the Frank family into believing that Frankenstein's monster is real. So they're just kind of casing. They're outside the castle. Meanwhile, Mr. Bloodstone and Billy have paired up. Apparently, they've had a heart-to-heart off camera, and they are now exploring Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory in the castle's dungeons. So Mr. Bloodstone brings Billy to the dormant body of Frankenstein's monster and explains that only a real Frankenstein can bring the monster to life.
Yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, I guess it's so the plot can happen, but no, Frankenstein should just be science. It's about the dangers of science. It's not like you don't need to have a special family bloodline here.
Nope.
So the monster is played by a guy named Brandon Carrillo, possibly Carrillo. I don't know his origins. He doesn't have a lot of credits. He was in 3 movies, all made by Fred Olen Ray, and 6 years apart. He has a 6-year career of 3 movies. They were trying to get David Prowse for this role, who was the white guy in the suit of Darth Vader in the Star Wars movies.
Oh.
But he was in failing health at the time, so he passed. So they got this guy, Brian Carrillo. I guess they got him because he played the monster at Universal Studios at the Beetlejuice Graveyard Review.
Wow.
And they just made sure that he looked different enough from the Beetlejuice Graveyard Review version of the character, I suppose, to not get sued. But, since we're talking like a weird little aside of Frankenstein, my favorite thing that's just horrible and depressing is when Boris Karloff, the most famous Frankenstein, died, people ran pictures of the Frankenstein monster in the newspaper, but a lot of them used a version of Frankenstein where he wasn't under the makeup.
Oh.
Because Boris Karloff played him in Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, and I think Ghost of Frankenstein. But they used the later version, Glenn Strange, who is a cowboy actor.
Mm-hmm.
version of Frankenstein. He played him in like House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein and stuff like that. So they're just like, oh, we'll run a picture of Frankenstein. It's got to be Boris Karloff, right? And
Find an appropriate photo of a legend who has passed. Is that so hard?
or have a weirdo on staff like me who can tell you, like, oh, well, that's Glenn Strange Frankenstein. That's Bela Lugosi Frankenstein from Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And that is Boris Karloff Frankenstein, clearly.
Okay. Well, back at Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory, we've just learned that only a real Frankenstein can bring the monster to life, and we don't do anything with this information right away. What we do instead is see Sandy, Thelma, and Mr. Bloodstone settle down for the night. Everybody's like curling up with some tea and a blanket, and they're going to bed. Billy stays awake to read about the family history and speak aloud to himself, considering what would happen if he did decide to bring the monster to life. And his key consideration is that he would finally have a friend.
Oh.
Yes.
So is Billy having trouble reading this journal? Because I assume it's written in German.
No, it seems totally fine. And also for an 11-year-old to voluntarily read a book, he's doing great.
Well, that's pretty great.
Eventually, Billy falls asleep. Outside, Constable Frug, Fraulein, Otto, they all fall asleep. And then the monster wakes up and he escapes. He breaks free of the bonds that were tying him to the table. And bam, it's morning. So he wanders up to the castle kitchen. He makes a big mess in the kitchen. He is stumbling around and groaning for all the world like he's playing Herman Munster. He has a comedic run-in with Aunt Thelma, who's can't see because she's got cucumbers and a face mask over her like eyes and face, and she mistakes him for Billy, and he pushes her over and she's upset about it, right?
He's like 20 times his size, and but she's grabbing his wrist, which is not in the right spot, and she's like, oh, Billy,
why are you disturbing my sleep, blah blah blah. It's very dumb. The monster finds his way outside, still stumbling around, and narrowly escapes Constable Frug's notice, because Constable Frug is like, should I get up out of my nice little nap zone and go looking? No, it's so unlikely that the monster will come around, and like the monster's right there and he doesn't see it. He's like, okay.
Hilarious.
But the point is, the monster's on the loose. He leaves the castle grounds, and Billy's the only one who knows this, and so he's like, oh, this is my responsibility. I better go after the monster and find him. Back in the States, we go back to George Frank, because he is still very stressed out about his job. He slept at his desk, and a friend of his at work gives him a heads up. The VP of the hotel chain is on his way to come talk to George, and the VP does not have a speaking role in this movie.
No, he doesn't. He walks in, does a reaction, and then walks out. You don't have to pay him as much then.
Yeah, that was clearly what was going on. But that meeting does not go well for George, and George is fired.
But that means that Darren Norris is finally going to be free from his desk. He has been sitting at this desk the entire movie.
Yes. Now, back at the castle, the attorney, Sheldon, is informing Sandy and Thelma about the $25,000 in back taxes, and is also filling them in on the local rich man Otto's plans to replace the castle with a mall. So Sandy and Thelma are like, hell no, we're gonna raise the funds and save the family home. The family that they've married into and just found out was Frankenstein's family. But they're being very supportive and loyal to George Frank, who is an absentee father and husband.
They think that he got a promotion instead of getting fired. They think that his vacation is a reward instead of, him being jobless.
Exactly. So like George is on the way, and they're like, yay, everything's gonna turn out great. Billy, who nobody has noticed is missing yet, has been following the monster somehow, and he ends up at the outdoor market from the beginning. The monster has not been caught by Billy yet, and he gets waylaid into this attempted comedic interaction with a blind monk who accidentally beats the monster up with his staff, offers him sour grapes and poison water. Like, poison, like, not gonna kill you, but like make your stomach upset.
Yeah, give you diarrhea.
Yeah.
This scene almost is funny. Like, a little
Sort
tweaking
of.
and this could be funny.
Yeah.
So the blind monk here is an actor named Tommy Kirk. Tommy Kirk was a huge star about 60 years ago. He was the kid in Old Yeller. He played Fred McMurray's son in The Absent-Minded Professor and stuff like that. He was in Swiss Family Robinson. He was Fred McMurray's son in The Shaggy Dog until he turned 20 and he was caught having sex with a 15-year-old boy. So Disney personally fired him then. This was in 1964, 65 or something like that. But then his movie The Misadventure of Merlin Jones turned out to be a hit. So they're like, okay, well, you can film the sequel to Merlin Jones and then you're fired. So then he dealt with a lot of homophobia and eventually became a drug addict and stuff like that and got out of the business. But before all that, he did kind of fall into a bunch of the beach movies of the 60s and 70s, like It's a Bikini World and The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini and The Weird World of Dr. Goldfoot. Dr. Goldfoot has a bikini machine in one of those other movies. But basically, he worked as a waiter and just kind of lived a quiet life. And then Fred Olen Ray kind of tracked him down and got him to work again. He was in a small part in Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold and things. He died about a year ago, but he kind of got his act together in the end. Being gay in the 60s was hard, and in the 50s too.
Being a child predator is also hard.
And being a child predator is also hard. 20 and 15, it's questionable at best. Yeah, you're also a 20-year-old celebrity who doesn't know what real life is. So you can only blame the kid so much at that point. Who the fuck knows? So he's a complicated kind of tragic figure. R.I.P. Tommy Kirk.
All right. Well, Tommy Kirk causes the monster to run away with a roll of toilet paper in hand in search of a place to relieve himself. Billy eventually finds the monster, and his gambit is, let's disguise the monster with glasses and a shawl.
Yeah. I took these things from Aunt Thelma before I left for no reason, but I have them now, so here you go, wear them. So we immediately cut to the monster in drag, kind of, but he's just wearing glasses and a shawl, and it's like, oh, this is my grandma, which is just so dumb and absurd. It's like, okay, this is kind of funny, but not worth it, not worth watching the movie for. So
correct. But surprisingly, the disguise fools nobody except for Constable Frug, who they run into, and Constable Frug gives them directions back to the castle. So that's played for laughs. So here's where we are all set up. Billy's got the monster. Otto, Fraulein, and Frug still, their plan to scare the family is still in play, and Sandy and Thelma and Sheldon are on the same page of let's raise the money. Our next set of hijinks are Billy needs to get the monster back inside the castle without his mom knowing because he doesn't want his mom to freak out. George has, in the meantime, flown to Germany and arrives at the castle. Billy needs to show up and be like, "Hi, Dad," and also sneak the monster in. So there's some hijinks. It's not funny. They spend too much time on this scene. Ultimately, the monster does return to the laboratory and he falls asleep because he's exhausted. There's something wrong with him. And now is the perfect time for George to announce that he's been fired. And that's great because he wants to prioritize Sandy and Billy as his family. So not only is he embracing the name and heritage of Frankenstein, he's ready to get a local job in Germany and secure a loan to pay the back taxes. So there's no problems there. You can just go to Europe as an American citizen and just start working. There's no red tape. There's no visas. It's fine. Okay.
You don't have to speak German because nobody else does. So
nothing can rain on his parade right now. They're even going to invite Otto and Fraulein to dinner and convince them to give up the plans of building the shopping mall on the property. They are going to live in the castle, make it their family home, and they are going to live happily ever after.
Yeah, and Otto and Fraulein are all into it because they're like, well, we can have Frug dress up like a monster and scare them out of the property.
Yes, that's their plans for dinner. Yep. Okay, so down in the laboratory, the monster is lethargic. For reasons, Mr. Bloodstone and Billy are convinced that it's dying.
But it's already an undead monster, so you can just revive it.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, he's dying. You're like, it's been dead always. They determine that they have to figure out something to save the monster's life. Thelma sees the monster accidentally, she faints dead away. She is now traumatized from seeing the monster. The monster has, over the past several minutes, developed the power of clear and coherent speech, which is new at this point in the movie. And it declares to Mr. Bloodstone and Billy that the most important thing to save is the castle. That he will be okay. Like, he is undead. He cannot die. Save the castle. For reasons, because the monster doesn't know about Otto's plan, but okay, whatever. Meanwhile, Constable Frug is preparing for the dinner at Dr. Frankenstein's castle. He has put on green makeup and a wig because he is going to impersonate the monster and scare the family into selling. Otto and Fraulein show up at the constable's place to, plot and plan and pregame the dinner, and they are completely fooled by Constable's disguise.
Disguises work in this movie, okay? Yeah.
So Otto throws Fraulein at Frug to save himself, and Fraulein's also scared until Frug grabs her and kisses her, and then she changes her tune. Like, her first meaningful dialogue of the movie is when she says that the kiss made her feel all tingly. That's a quote, all tingly. So Otto's super embarrassed and angry, and Fraulein is making hard eyes at Frug now.
I mean, it's only minor sexual assault, so I mean.
Okay. So we've done another scene cut, and George and Sandy are in the outdoor market now. They're like pre-gaming dinner and just doing some shopping in a narrow alleyway. They come across the vendor who is selling the Frankenstein doll, and as part of George's newfound acceptance of his family legacy, and he's also realizing that he has harmed his relationship with his son, he purchases the doll to give to Billy as a gift.
I'm glad we set up that doll.
Totally.
Thank God we had that opening scene where somebody shows you that doll.
So when George gives the Frankenstein doll to Billy, this allows them to speak openly about the actual monster in the laboratory. So Billy fills Frank in on all of this, and they go down to the laboratory to move the plot forward. Meanwhile, Sandy and Thelma are alone upstairs with Otto and Fraulein because they've already arrived for dinner. And when Billy and George are kind of messing around with the monster, Thelma and Sandy are becoming increasingly frustrated, wondering where George and Billy are because they would like to start eating.
Just like men, avoiding the hosting duties.
So, Billy reveals to George that not only is the monster real, he is dying right now. They're wondering, like, what can we do to save the monster? And luckily, there is that handwritten Dr. Frankenstein legacy book, which outlines what's going on, okay? Dr. Frankenstein wrote, "In the event of my death, the monster can only be fully revived when reactivated by all the remaining living Frankensteins. This way, I can die with the knowledge that I did everything in my power to keep the Frankenstein family legacy alive."
Okay, so they didn't read that part before, like, because George, Darren Norris describes that as, oh, you guys didn't read the fine print.
Yes.
Which could have been funny if his power was bureaucracy and, like, reading the fine print before, because he worked that office job, so he could have really set that up and had that be, like, a little bit of a better payoff. Okay, so while we're at it, wasn't there a second book introduced too? Like, he finds the one old journal, and then, like, a scene later, we're introduced to another old book, and I was like, wait, what? What is this? Movie is sloppy.
Both of those books were handwritten by the most recent Dr. Frankenstein, and one was the personal journal / diary and maps and detailed instructions, and the other one is the family legacy.
Okay, so but it's important to keep those in two separate books.
One was black, one was red. They were both very slim volumes. I think if he just purchased a thicker notebook, it could have held everything, but maybe he was cheap.
And I mean, based on the time it's happening, these could be in a Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
This is the Trapper Keeper of Dr. Frankenstein.
So now with the knowledge that all the living Frankensteins must contribute to reviving the monster, Billy and George pull that lever to activate the machinery to jolt the monster to life. And it works. The monster sits up and exclaims, "Monster, alive and ready to kick some serious butt.
Is there a villain for the monster to fight?
No,
Is it just in the general sense, like he's feeling good and ready to kick some butt?
must be.
Does he kick some butt later on in the movie? Does he do anything after that?
Sort of. Okay. So upstairs, Sandy and Thelma, they need a break. They're like, you know what? We're going to be in the kitchen for a little while. They leave Otto and Fraulein to kind of snack on some hors d'oeuvres on their own. And this is the point where the monster comes up from the basement behind Otto and Fraulein. And Otto sees the monster and mistakes him for Constable Frug and starts berating him. He's like, this costume's terrible. Where have you been? You're playing, like, you're being bad at scaring the family, blah, blah, blah.
Hilarious.
Fraulein, meanwhile, recognizes the monster for the genuine monster, is trying to clue him in. He's ignoring her because she's just a Fraulein. When he finally realizes that the monster is real, they flee the castle. And the monster does pursue them. There's like a little moat situation. He chases them across the bridge across the moat. And they actually pass Constable Frug, who is in disguise, and he's like on his way into the castle. So the monster and Frug have an encounter. Frug is so scared he leaps off that little bridge and into the moat. And then shortly thereafter, the Frank family, George and Sandy and Billy, come out of the castle chasing the commotion, and they are reunited with the monster. And it's so important right here to note that Sandy is completely unfazed by the monster. They're just like a big happy family.
The Frankenstein monsters are real in this universe, and we know that Frankenstein is his last name and that he's in Castle Frankenstein. But are the movies still real? Or, because they're selling Frankenstein dolls, so did she know that the monster was there?
It could have been solved by some communication, and all of the hijinks of sneaking the monster in and all of the stuff could have been avoided because Sandy's not bothered.
Yeah, she doesn't give a fuck.
Right. So, problem number one, Otto wanting to purchase and demolish the castle, that is taken care of. He has been frightened away. Problem number two is the back taxes. And so they kind of end that scene of like, oh no, what do we do for money? So they turn the castle into a tourist destination.
You can do that with no money, right?
Yeah, just start charging. It's fine. You don't need a business plan.
Or an advertising budget. Or insurance, or that's fine.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah, everybody is happy that they've turned the place into a tourist trap.
Everybody kind of gets a happy ending. The tour guide has a job, right? This is a new person. The tourists are happy because they can like touch everything, and like one tourist goes off script or what?
But Meredith, is the tour guide a new person?
Oh, I thought. So who is the tour guide?
The tour guide is Kimberly A. Ray, the writer of the movie.
Oh.
Writer cameo.
Nice! I did not realize that. Okay, well, since it's the writer of the movie, then I will highlight something that, a choice she made. She deadpanned a delivery when a tourist went off to, like, pull the electricity lever. She said, no, stop, don't. Which is a callback to
Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gene Wilder, who played Willy Wonka, who also played Dr. Frankenstein in
Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein, thank you. So she's making a connection to Gene Wilder in a roundabout way that I think we're the last generation that will actually just like catch this.
That is the cleverest thing this movie has done.
It really is. Okay. So everyone's happy. They're paying $5 for photo ops with the monster. Even Aunt Thelma has had a happy ending because she is just dressed as the Bride of Frankenstein and hams it up for those photos. That's great. Everybody's happy. No more problems. The end. But there was a loose end that we hadn't tied up. Whatever happened to Sheldon? And this is part of Fred Olen Ray's endless optimism that he's going to get a sequel, because they cut back to Sheldon after the movie ends. He's lost in the woods and he comes across Dracula and he's like, hey, have you seen a kid of about this height? And the man in the cape points in a direction and the camera zooms up on the sign that says Transylvania, 7 kilometers in this direction. So Sheldon's like, great, and heads off that way.
So he was looking for Billy so long that he walked from Germany to Romania?
Yeah. So I don't think that he got the sequel that he was angling for, but hey, hope
But he
springs
never
eternal.
really has. So
Yeah. So that was Billy Frankenstein.
that was Billy Frankenstein. Okay, so whenever somebody reads a book in a Fred Olen Ray movie, I have to look up what that book is. At one point, Sandy, the mom, is reading a book called Angry Moon by Terrell Langford, aka T.L. Langford, aka, like, I forget, he had some sort of stupid name that he used as an alias when he co-wrote Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. What?
Easter egg!
There's like 7 people that Fred Olen Ray knows, and he is going to pimp their shit and put them in his movies. It's found family. This is like, Fast and the Furious, but for real. It's all about family,
What do you think about the entertainment value of Billy
Oh, God.
Frankenstein?
Watching this movie is just misery. It is a painful experience. It's not bad enough to be funny bad, and it's not good at all. It's a bunch of people speaking aloud to the camera like Dora the Explorer.
Mhm.
The whole thing has the production values of a beer commercial. Nothing makes sense. I mean, it's a kid's movie. It's not supposed to make super sense or anything, but there's like nothing to get out of this movie. But talking about it, it kind of seems fun and enjoyable. I have more fun talking about this movie than watching it. I would never want to watch it again. So I'm going to say entertainment value is, I'm going to give it a 3. If it's just for the movie's watching experience itself, it's like a 1 or a 2. But it's fun to talk about, a 5 to 10 to talk about. So yeah, let's call it a 3.
That's pretty generous. You're getting the secondary entertainment value out of it. How about the production value?
Oh my God. It's like 2. Like, you had a weekend to shoot a beer commercial. That's what it looks like.
Bad news.
I just assume they had leftover sets and they wrote the script in a weekend and did it, but there's no like IMDb trivia about this that'll let me know why this is the thing, why this exists.
How about sense making? How would you rate that?
Oh God, 2? Nothing in this movie makes any fucking sense. I mean, come on.
What would you rate this movie on effort?
Oh God. I'm gonna say 3. It's just barely there.
Yeah.
But the shots are in focus and framed like normal shots. It looks like a Nickelodeon show, especially having Darren Norris from Ned's Declassified right there in the middle of the screen. I think some of the Chuck Cirillo music is fun. I'm gonna give it a 3, and I feel generous about that.
Yeah. So this, I think, is the lowest collective ratings that you've given to any of the Fred Olen Ray movies we've watched so far.
It's punishing.
Well, we don't have to watch it again. That's good.
Oh, I'm gonna watch this every day. I deserve.
What are we going to watch next time?
So I think that the Steven Seagal one should be our big season finale. So that means we have to watch Bikini Jones and the Temple of Eros.
Nice.
Which is the closest thing I could get to one of his like just straight non-horror booby pictures that's free on streaming.
Okay, Bikini Jones, then Steven Seagal. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, well, until next time, I'm Meredith.
And I'm Kennedy. Bye.
Going Over Our Freds was created and produced by us, Michael Kennedy and Meredith Halsey.
Our theme was composed and performed by Justin Nozick. Find more music for him at Bandcamp. Search for The Plague Physicians.
Artwork by Michael Kennedy. Special thanks to everyone who helped make the season possible, including the friends and family who let us watch these movies instead of this year's Academy Award nominees. And thank you for listening.
If you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to Going Over Our Freds on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter at Goof Podcast, and find us on Instagram at Going Over Our Freds.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For questions, comments, and complaints, email us at goingoverourfreds@gmail.com.
Thanks.